Okay, call to order. Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody face the flag, please. Tom, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Secretary, would you please roll call, please?
Surely. Pioneer Town, Michelle Myers. Yucca Mesa, Tom Ziegert.
Here.
Landers, Richard Lutringer. Absent, excused. Joshua Tree, Mark Lundquist. Here. Flamingo Heights, Lib Koenig. Here. Desert Heights, Pat Flanagan. Here. Wonder Valley, Teresa Seitz. Here. Morongo Valley, Gail Swarrett. Here. Copper Mountain Mesa, Mary Helen Tuttle. Here.
Thank you, Secretary. Okay, adoption of agenda.
I move we approve the agenda. I second it.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. So moved. E, approval of minutes of January 11th, 2016. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. F, introducing your law and fire enforcement panel. After a PowerPoint presentation by Captain Jeff Joling on basin-wide statistics, the following Morongo Basin law and fire enforcement personnel will be available for question and answer, period. Now, hopefully, everybody that wants to ask a question, those question applications are over there on the table. Please fill one out. If you want to comment at the end of the agenda on any item, those comment sheets are over here. And I'd like to introduce our panel tonight, Jeff Oltz. He is Chief Ranger at the National Park. John Chamberlain, San Bernardino County Fire Division Chief. And then we have Simon Miller, Information Officer, California Highway Patrol. Eric Robles, Lieutenant Highway Patrol. And we have Supervisor Michelle Miller from the Probation Department. We have Michelle Berge, Deputy District Attorney. And Ron Webster, also from Deputy District Attorney Supervisor. And we have Jeff Joling, Captain, Morongo Basin Sheriff's Division. And we're going to kick this off with Captain Joling, a PowerPoint presentation. All of you asked in the past for statistics on the basin. One of the nice things about tonight's statistics is recently they have categorized different areas. Some areas are lumped together, but those statistics, I understand, weren't really available. They were on a basin-wide basis. So with that, I will let Jeff run his PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll open it up with the written questions. And if we have time, we'll follow it up with comments. So limit it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. So tonight we're going to go through a little bit. I brought a lot of statistics for you. I know every month you guys ask me for them. Just a slight disclaimer when it comes to statistics. Statistics are just indicators of things. Yes, these are accurate statistics, but depending on which database they get drawn from at what point in time in history and what information you're asking a database for, can kind of tweak your information a little bit. So if you see the sheriff's annual report, if we're off, it will be off by maybe a couple, according to the analysts that work for the department. But everybody at the station and at headquarters down in San Bernardino worked really hard to try and make this as accurate and as educational for you as possible. So I don't know that I have a clicker, so we'll try and go through. If you want to take that on, if you break it, there's a whole room full of people that'll. Okay, some of the things that the Sheriff's Department does in the Morongo Basin, of course, we do patrol enforcement. You see our marked patrol cars out there. We answer your calls for service. Behind the scenes, you have a detective unit that's handling all your felony investigations, as well as a local jail to throw all your bad guys and girls. We offer live scan services here by appointment. You don't have to be a criminal to be fingerprinted here. We offer live scan services for employment, for state purposes. We do all kinds of court-ordered registrations, so when the court orders something, we register them and we track them. And we'll be talking about them a little bit later with the statistic. We also do tow hearings. When people have their vehicle towed, we actually have a hearing if they so desire to see if it was lawful and done correctly. We do private event contracts for the parades and other things that happen in the different communities. We do off-highway vehicle enforcement and education, neighborhood watch training, community group participation, what we're doing here tonight, as well as we have 4 different kind of volunteer units. We have citizens on patrol all over the Morongo Basin, search and rescue, explorers, and reserve deputies. Okay, behind the scenes that you get from countywide that you don't see here at the local station, but you have aviation, arson bomb, coroners, homicide, criminal intelligence, Grand Theft Auto Task Force that we're partnered with California Highway Patrol, Human Trafficking Unit, Scientific Investigations, Latent Fingerprint, DNA, Crimes Against Children, SWAT, Gang Enforcement, Narcotic and Marijuana Division. We have lots of partnerships, the Board of Supervisors as well as assemblymen, congressmen. We partner with our leaders that represent us on all levels, as well as BLM, CHP, the fire department, community organizations in every part of the Morongo Basin, Joshua Tree National Park, the Marine Corps base, and even the local hospital. Okay, so this is what your area looks like according to the Sheriff's Department. When we talk about the Morongo Basin, you're really talking, if everybody see the screen fairly clear, it's 2,729 square miles. And your population at the end of 2015 was just north of 23,000. Keep that in mind with how many square miles we got. Okay, this is a question that you guys ask me every single month when I come here. If you don't ask me a question, you at least accuse me of something as you point a finger at me of how long it takes for a deputy sheriff to come to your doorstep. Okay, now keep in mind that last year, our average calls, just calls for service, was more than 20,000 calls for service where somebody wanted to see a deputy sheriff. Now, if you divide that by 365, you get 56 calls per day, and then you figure most of them don't call, because we actually did look at it, but I didn't bring a graph chart, that most of them don't call between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. But calls pick up about 9 o'clock in the morning, and they go pretty nonstop all the way through about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So these are, these are factual numbers, emergency calls. If you see a sheriff's unit with lights and sirens on and you have an emergency and need to see a deputy sheriff in any part in the Morongo Basin, 12 minutes. Now, that takes a little bit of teamwork on our part, because if you're in Wonder Valley and you have an emergency, we're going to send somebody from 29 Palms if they're closer, if it's a deputy working in the city, to get to you as soon as you can. But all those numbers added together and crunched up and averaged 12 minutes. But that's not most calls. That's actually a very small fraction where people have a life-threatening emergency where they need to see a deputy as quick as possible to come and be a gunslinger. Priority, where, hey, somebody's breaking into my car. It's not an emergency, your life's not in danger. Think of emergency calls as my life's in danger or somebody else's life's in danger, but a priority call. There's a bad guy doing something somewhere, 16 minutes. But remember, on the emergency calls, our average handling time is 2 hours. If you have a life-threatening crisis where you have an emergency, they're there on average, a whole year average together, for 2 hours. If you have a priority call, about 1 hour it takes them to handle that. Okay, if you have a non-priority call where it's a crime that happened in the past or it's something you just want to see a deputy and talk to them about, on average, it's 35 minutes. However, understand this. Depending on how many deputies I have on duty at any specific time to answer calls for service, if you call in a non-priority call and they already had an emergency call or two, okay, it's going to push that back several hours. Now, do you get the math of where the deputies are at? Of why it takes so long? If you have a non-emergency, non-life-threatening thing, it's going to take a while. So, and I wanted to show you guys a little bit of historical, because everybody in the here and now says it's so terrible. I wanted to show you 6 years at a snapshot. Everywhere from 2010 through 2015 of what the calls for service. We have a little more. We're probably the highest. We're not quite as high as 2010, but 2015 is pretty close. But all these numbers, they're really, there's no peaks and valleys here. It's pretty close for how many calls for service. Okay, reports taken. Now, when you talk about reports taken, not every one of these calls, it doesn't mean they're, in 2015, there were 1,679 reports taken where a deputy sheriff took a report number and he wrote a report about it. Not all those are burglaries or robberies or anything else. Sometimes they towed a car. Sometimes it's informational. Sometimes it was a dog bite. We arrested 400, you can go on. We arrested 455 people last year. Obviously not as good as 2012 where 606 were arrested. But not everybody, of those 20,000 calls for service, of the 1,600 reports that were taken, not 1,600 people needed to go to jail. But 455 of them obviously did. Okay, so when we talk communities, and you have your Joshua Tree Mac here, everybody has their community representative. This is the way that we break down that, all those square mileage, the Morongo Valley, Joshua Tree, Yucca Mesa Landers, Johnson/Homestead Valley, Pioneer Town, Northern 29 Palms in the Base, and Wonder Valley and Amboy. Okay, so everybody was thinking we had a really bad year in burglaries in 2015. Well, here's 6 years as a snapshot, and it is pretty dramatic, isn't it? But pay attention to the top of the screen. I tried to be really clear that the percentages displayed are the difference from the previous year. It is not that, it will actually, it's the worst of the 6 years, obviously, but there's a 130% increase from 2014, but 2014 was the lowest residential burglary year, at least in a time span that we're examining. So, you weren't in the room when we were doing our research and what we wanted to present to you, so we had to kind of think for you and what you would want to see, so we broke them up by month. So here's all the burglaries in the entire Morongo Basin by month. It kind of varies. Some months are worse than other months. Yeah, November and March were really bad. So we took it a step further and said, what about the burglaries in which communities in the Morongo Basin? So you can see as far Yucca Mesa and Landers they were victimized quite a bit, as well as Joshua Tree. So next slide. Okay, now keep in mind, of the 212 burglaries that we're talking about, that's spread over 2,700 square miles, over 23,000 people. Okay, but let's go beyond burglaries a little bit. Let's talk about major crimes, okay? Remember, 23,310 residents approximately that live in the Morongo Basin. Here are your homicide, they're your murders, your rapes, your robberies, and your arsons, okay? You're under 10. You had 0 murders in the entire Morongo Basin in 2015. It's the lowest in a 6-year snapshot. Yeah, there were 7 reported rapes, there were 7 reported robberies, and there were 9 reported arsons. So
Convictions or just crimes reported?
these are reports that were people reported. And we're going to look at this again by community, but again, statistics are only indicators of things. If we go to the next slide, if you look at the major crimes, the categories that we were just talking about, you can see that Morongo Valley, that it shows up on the bar graph that for the arsons, but I'm aware of the arsons that were reported. It was cars that were stolen, they were from out of the area, and they burned them across the county line, and that's where Morongo Valley is. So, and you got to look at your qualifying number up on the left-hand side. It's less than 5 in the Morongo Valley area. In Yucca Mesa and Landers, the same thing. There were a few arsons. Almost all of those involved vehicles. But even though the yellow bar represents rape, those are reported rapes and robberies. Now, can you go back one slide? When you look in 2015, remember that, again, via population, your numbers over 2,700 square miles with 23,000 people, those statistics, I mean, it's, and I don't make light of a single person being victimized, but maybe the numbers weren't quite as bad as we initially thought. Next slide. Okay, so you're wondering where we spend all the rest of our time. Okay, so we couldn't have the presentation go all night long, and because there are so many subcategories in the penal code and vehicle code, I mean, you start breaking things down, you can go on forever. So we had to group some things together in the essence of time. So we wanted to show what is comparatively on all assaults, is the red bar in this graph charts, all thefts, grand theft auto, and all vandalism. So 2015, yeah, doesn't look as quite, maybe 2011 was a little bit higher, but this is where the deputy sheriffs spent a majority of their time conducting investigations, making arrests, handling calls for service. This is a majority of those other kinds of calls for service. Okay, yeah, I know it's a popular belief, or at least it's speculated on, that people dump sex registrants in the Morongo Basin. However, I wanted to bring you a few facts of exactly, because the Sheriff's Department, we're actually responsible for registering them. If the court orders someone to be a sex offense registrant, to keep track of them, they come to the Sheriff's Department. They get fingerprinted, they check in. We actually go out to their houses and check on them twice a year to make sure that they're in compliance. But we wanted you to know, yeah, does the graph go up? From 2010, we started at 63. It had a slight increase all the way to 2015 to 89. But remember, that's 89 people out of 23,310. That's 0.4% of your population. And the famous off-highway vehicle complaints, in 2010, there were 446. We finished 2015 with 301 complaints, where people calling in, complaining about motorcycles or whatnot. So in essence, those are the statistics I brought you tonight. I hope it's some useful information. And Mark, where are you at?
Right here. You gonna flip that light on?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it. What we're going to do now is Mary Helen has got questions, and she's going to acknowledge who wrote the questions. She's going to filter out the duplicates, and then she's going to acknowledge the person out there. You may want to raise your hand and ask all the questions I assume are for the panel. Mary Helen, do you want to go ahead and start on that?
Yeah, does anybody else have any other questions they want to?
Go ahead and fill out your questionnaire, and as she's doing those, you can hand them in. And the podium
Okay.
microphone does work, the one you pick up. Is there a microphone on the podium on your left that you pick up? No?
Oh,
Yeah, right there. That's
This big one?
hardwired. That one works well.
okay. Okay. The first question is from Peter Spur, and this is for DA, for DA and probation. Don't repeat offenders, even small property crimes less than $950, get violation of probation and state time. Burglaries once got 6 months or more, county repeats got state time.
I will start. Again, my name is Ron Webster. I work here in Joshua Tree. Can everyone hear? Since the passage of Prop 47, which was a voter-enacted initiative that decriminalized a lot of felonies and made them misdemeanors, there is no repeat offender enhancement for misdemeanor crimes of theft and anything that's under $950. So it used to be if someone, by their fourth time, we could send them to prison and charge them with a felony, which was more serious from our standpoint. Now, most of those offenses are county prison, which means they basically go to the jail. There is no minimum 6 months. I think the question also asked about probation. Typically, someone committing one of these offenses, where they're stealing something less than $950, will receive a county jail sentence and very often be placed on probation, which is the method that we have to ensure that they're held accountable for paying back what they stole. That's one of the tools that we have to make sure that the person who suffered a loss can get their money back. If they violate probation by committing a new offense, it will increase the punishment, but at the end of the day, it's still a misdemeanor, and misdemeanors are going to get lower priority in terms of jail space. And one of our frustrations, and it's not the sheriff's fault, there's only so many beds they have, and so the misdemeanors are less likely to be kept in jail, often serving their time on weekends. So I don't know if that answered the question completely, but happy to keep going.
All right, the next question is from Larry Lavore. Trespassing on unoccupied property. Would posting property, no trespassing per Penal Code 602, help for reporting of a break-in by a third party when the owner is not at home? I guess this would be a sheriff question, or if you can answer it.
Yeah, I don't mind taking it, and if Captain Jolene has some, yeah. If we're talking about an inhabited dwelling, a house that someone lives in, or a structure?
Yes.
Because for us, it's always much more serious if it's a place where someone lives. The Penal Code distinguishes between inhabited and uninhabited dwellings. So if you have a back shed, it's uninhabited. If it's a residence where you stay and you sleep and you have your belongings, we consider that an inhabited dwelling. We're always preferring to charge someone with breaking into an inhabited dwelling, whether or not there's trespassing signs. If they break into your house and we can prove who did it, we'll charge them with residential burglary. From our standpoint, that is a felony. It has a greater sentencing range. And in California, we still do have 3 strikes law, and residential burglary is something that we can use as a strike. So that provides us a greater incentive for people not to reoffend. So ideally, if you can make sure the deputies know that someone stays in that residence, and one of the things we see here a lot is people have vacation homes and part-time homes and they're out of the area. We can still allege that as a residential burglary if you let the deputy know that we still stay there. We planned on returning. Information we don't always get shared with the deputies initially, because it makes a big difference to us. The trespassing signs will help make it a misdemeanor if they come onto the property and there's signage saying there's no trespassing, but it's there's not a lot of deterrent that we have on that level of a misdemeanor. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but someone's...
If I see somebody breaking into my neighbor's property, and I know they're not there, but I know something's going on or something just has gone on, do we have to wait for the owner to report it, or if it's posted, can I just report it?
You can report it. Ultimately, the sheriff will contact the owner and make sure this person didn't have permission to be in the house. And the sooner someone can report it, the higher the probability will actually catch the person. And it gets difficult once the person's no longer at the scene, even if they're caught with the property that was stolen. You know, they always just say, I just bought it from somebody, or I found it. And even though that's not believable, ultimately, we have to get a jury of people like you and me, convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that they actually entered the residence and stole it. So the closer in time and at the location someone can be caught, the higher the probability we could successfully prosecute that. Okay.
The next question that I have is, my house was burglarized in November 2015. A friend was murdered while staying in his camper in October, a couple of streets from my house. Is there any way to know if any progress has been made on these crimes? Is there any way we can find out if there are any leads or updates on these crimes?
I don't want to be argumentative, but the only reported murder we had in the entire Morongo Basin actually was in the city of 29 Palms, and that was solved with the suspect arrested within hours. 2014, I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me, October 2014.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Captain Jolie.
Absolutely. That's okay, you're only a year off. On follow-ups of cases that are felony nature, if you call the sheriff's station and speak with the detective bureau, you can get an update on your case or a case that you're a witness or a victim of, absolutely. I'm not familiar, I hate to use this disclaimer, I wasn't here in November of 14, but that can certainly be researched and the facts and a current update on the case to who's interested. Does that help?
Yeah, I think the ongoing investigation, and they say they can't say anything about the murder. I think that's kind of what people are left with if anybody asks about it.
Because you said you have to be a witness or a victim. But where does that leave the rest of our community in getting information to be able to find out how well you're doing your job and keeping up with what's going on, even if it's unsolved? The community wants to know that you are on that and not, oh, well, it was 2014, now it's 2016, that case is just kind of set in a file somewhere. Because
Is there a central location where updates can be found for everybody?
No, because when it comes to, let's use a murder investigation as an example. Those kind of cases never go into a filing cabinet to collect dust. They're assigned to an entire homicide team at a specialized investigation in San Bernardino. They regularly check in with the immediate family and the family who they're in contact with, representatives of the surviving members of the victim's family. So they provide them constant updates. Now, they do not provide constant updates to the entire community except through press releases. Either there was an arrest, somebody was arrested, or we've issued a warrant, and they provide information to all of the general public about that investigation is how they communicate.
The next question.
is that if this is a friend and they weren't born in this neighborhood, chances are their family doesn't live here. So how can the community get any kind of information about what's going on? Because their family may live in Massachusetts or Jersey
Right.
or something. We get, people who migrate here from all over the planet.
Did you write this question, sir?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, Captain Joling, go ahead and answer that question as quickly. We're not going to take any
was-
questions that
was
are
it-
not written on the answer sheet. We want to give everybody a chance to ask their questions. We're going to go through the questions that people have written on the form, and then we're going to open it up, and you may ask questions with a time limit. Go ahead. You can answer that one question.
The entire community gets their updates by press release. As far as I know, we do not have an unsolved murder from November of 14. Perhaps we do. Perhaps I'm ignorant about it. But in which community was this? Okay. Okay. But to answer your question, sir, a little bit further back in the room, I'm not sure that constant updates on a murder investigation go to the entire community. Everybody can inquire, but that's how the homicide division reports to the community, is by press release.
Wait a minute, hold on. We're not going to get into an argument tonight. We're going to go through the questions, please. No, we will get to your question, so everybody has a chance. So people that filled out the questionnaire, if you're on that questionnaire, you'll get your question answered. If not, you'll have to wait until a public forum. Thank you. Mary Ellen?
This question,
Can I do a quick follow-up on my last answer?
Yes, you can.
Take the heat off of him. If we're talking about residential burglary, if your house gets broken into or a house that you stay in, there is no minimum theft value for us to be able to proceed on that as a felony. And breaking and entering for purposes of burglary can include your garage if it's attached to the primary residence. If you've got a common roof, it can include the garage, even if the garage door is open. It gets harder to prove, but technically anyone, we call it piercing the veil. So if you leave a window open and someone reaches in and steals something, residential burglary. If they walk through your unlocked front door and steal something, if they have the intent, we have to prove they had the intent to steal when they entered. which isn't always easy. A lot of times they'll say, I was just going in there looking for a place to sleep or eat. But if they take something, it's residential burglary if there's any value attached to the item at all.
This next question has to do with crime scene investigation. It seems as though the Sheriff's Department needs special training on crime scene investigation procedures, and would a volunteer crime scene search unit be able to help in that?
No. No, well, Mary Helen, I'll try and do a better job of asking that, but our deputies are trying to process. We also have sheriff service specialists that have a little bit extra equipment who come out, and if it is a complicated crime scene, we have the Scientific Investigations Division from San Bernardino, which comes out, who actually processes the crime scenes on homicides or complicated crime scenes.
I believe that the question was more about, I don't want to do a simple burglary. Is there a crime scene investigation procedure for a burglary or tagging or breaking and entering?
It's processed, whatever the deputy sheriff on scene that's assigned the investigation on what they can determine what needs to be done and should be done, and then they do that.
Yeah, I was with the deputy sheriff that was at a crime scene, a burglary that I reported of a neighbor, and I didn't feel like the sheriff really knew what to do. I feel like I was kind of leading him through how to look for evidence, how to find the owner. He didn't really know the first thing about even how to find who the owner of the property was. So I just feel that some kind of special training is maybe warranted, maybe a refresher or something. Because I really did not feel like the sheriff that was there had very many skills, honestly. I mean, to be able to deal with it. He's going, I don't know who the owner is. I don't know what the address is here, so I really can't report it. I'm going, no, let's look around, let's find something. I looked for pieces of paper and I found addresses on it. I looked for phone numbers, I found it. So I was doing most of the investigating with him and feeding him information.
Can I talk a little bit about that? My name is Michelle Berge, and I work for the District Attorney's Office, and so part of my job is reading police reports and determining whether or not there's enough there to file a case and to prosecute a crime. And I have lived in the community 28 years, and I've been with the District Attorney's Office up here 8 years, 4 years as a volunteer and 4 years as a full-time DA. And I can tell you that our deputies up here really do a fantastic job. When we see the reports, they are the most awesome foot trackers you have ever seen. They receive all these specialized training, and they can track who did what. They can tell you which one was first, which one was second, which one was third. And they have resources available to them to find exactly what you're talking about, the owner of a property. But hang on just a second. But I'm going to tell you that sometimes people are new, or sometimes people are having a bad day. And so when those things happen, as community members, then we take on that role. And I was so glad to hear that you were willing to take on that role and to help out a deputy who maybe learned something that day and can learn from that experience. We do have a lot of new folks that come in and they get training, but I can tell you that we also have a lot of very experienced and seasoned deputies up here that have been up here for many, many years and who live in our community and work in our community. So I guess my answer to that question is, I'm sorry that you had that experience, but I am telling you from my experience, most of the cases I look at, I'm sitting there and I have to call them and say, well, what do you mean by this footprint was recent and was before that one? How can you tell? And they go into this whole thing about their training and how they've received all this training on foot tracking. And it's amazing how many of these burglary cases and trespassing cases and theft cases are solved with a shoe. And it's amazing.
There were a lot of tracks at that scene that were new, and
Well, and in a case like that, I think, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I would think that the sheriff's department might want to report about that. And they do have people at the front desk that you can make a report to them and let them know, and that gives us all feedback as to what we need to do in the future to keep our community safe. That's what we're all here for. We're all here to keep the community safe. We're here to fight for victims. That's what all of us up here do. So anything that you can offer to help us get better at that, we're all happy to hear those things.
This next question is on probation. Does the probation department offer classes to the people on probation to help them come back into society? And the question is, to live among civilized citizens?
My name is Michelle Miller. I'm a supervising probation officer out here in the Joshua Tree office. Just to give you a little rundown, when they're granted probation, they usually come from court over to us, and we do an orientation and assessment with them. We go over their terms and conditions, and we have a risk assessment tool that kind of tells us maybe what they need to work on. The first thing that we do is we tell them, you need to come back on what we have a resource day. It's once a month. We have resource providers, Pacific Clinics, mental health services, Copper Mountain College actually comes out, public health, transitional aid department comes, and workforce development are just the ones that are our main people that come out. They can sign up for any of those services, and basically, a lot of them do. But then we also have like some things that they need to focus on, and we do teach classes. We teach a parent project class, and we also teach another class that's called Thinking for a Change. And these classes take about 6 months, and they're to help individuals get better. I mean, that's ultimately our goal, is to make productive members in society and not criminals. So, did that answer your question? Typically, it's mostly misdemeanors, or I'm sorry, mostly felonies, but we do have a couple misdemeanors that we also address.
Thank you. The next question's for the fire department. Wake up. The question is, why does a fire truck accompany an ambulance for medical emergencies? And the rest of it was, why are you wasting taxpayer money with fueling that thing?
So that's a great question. Typically, we have separate response modes in the areas where we control the county fire ambulances. Hesperia, Yucca Valley, et cetera. We will send an ambulance only to respond to basic call criteria. Their call categorization is Alpha through Echo. The call takers will actually make a determination based on the 911 information that's provided by the caller and determine the appropriate level of response with it. The fire engine is predominantly there for extra manpower or staffing. There are paramedics on that rig, so in the event of a working call, a cardiac event, something along those lines, 2 paramedics is obviously better than 1. I'm very proud to tell you that of your 400 professional firefighters in San Bernardino County, over 300 of them are paramedics. So you have a very great depth there. Potentially San Bernardino City's coming on, that's almost another 100 paramedics. I will tell you, for crew safety, we're leaning more towards actually sending fire engines with the ambulances, and there's a reason for that. We run roughly 90,000 calls per year for service right now. Of that, we had 18 of our personnel this last year that were reported assaulted in some type of hospitalization manner where they had to be evaluated. That can mean anywhere from a bite to a stabbing. We recently had in Hesperia our guys get shot at. We just rolled out $500,000 worth of ballistic protection for our folks. It's not what the fire service used to be. It's not what I signed on for 20 some odd years ago. So to answer your question, there is a crew safety issue there. We've also made some adjustments with our law enforcement counterparts that saved us a tremendous amount of exposure time. We used to respond out for simple assault calls or something along those lines, and we would stage, is what's called stage. Basically, we would find an area in proximity to the call, and those people would wait until law enforcement proceeded in to clear the incident. Now what we're doing is, unless there's some type of specific complaint that would warrant it through the call intake process, we are holding those calls until law enforcement gets there and validates the need. I'm going to be very candid with you. We're rolling this out countywide. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that we have saved days of time in this last 6 months since we implemented it. There's times where calls will hold for 2 to 3 hours. As Jeff pointed out, or Captain Joling pointed out, if it's a lower priority call, we can't have an ambulance, which are very strapped. There's only 7 ambulances for the total area for the basin, including Morongo Basin Ambulance and county fire assets. We can't have them sitting on a street corner waiting for something like that. Did that answer the question enough? I know fuel's expensive. I'm sorry. I know what wear and tear is what it is, but we're more interested in crew safety and service delivery.
Thank you. The next question has to do with squatters in abandoned homestead cabins. What can be done about them?
Am I back on? Okay, so, squatters. If it's your property and they don't belong there, they are trespassing. So call us out, we will help you kick them out. They do not belong there, they are street trespassers. However, this comes with a slight disclaimer. Do not make verbal agreements, do not make written agreements, because then you're entering into just what I said. You're entering into the proxy of some sort of an agreement with them, and you now have a landlord-tenant relationship and not a trespasser-landowner relationship.
I asked the question, it has to do with squatters, but also tweakers. I mean, lots of them that, you know, we've had to have cabins torn down just to get rid of them. You know, and when you get a bunch of tweakers in your neighborhood, boy, your crime rate just goes through the roof.
Jeff, go ahead and answer that question. What we're going to do, as you can tell, this is kind of an experiment tonight. We're feeling what's going on now, and we'll tailor the next meeting, possibly next year, to include more comment period. But we'd like to go ahead and he's going to answer your question. We'd like to get through the comments that are written from the people that wrote down their questions, and then looks like we're running pretty well on time. We're going to open it up to 3-minute comments even before we get to the end of the agenda on the comments, and that'll be the time for the question and answer period. So go ahead and answer that, Jeff. We'll let Mary Helen, after you answer that, Mary Helen, we'll go through the rest of the questions. Do you have more? How many more? Okay, we'll get through those, and as time permits, we'll go ahead and open it up. Thank you.
I understand your concern, sir, but what part was the second part of that question then?
Well, because of the tweakers, you know, I mean, your crime rate goes up. I mean, incredible. I mean, they steal from each other, they steal from us. It's, you know.
Right, but.
So what can be done about it? Do we have any legal recourse? I mean, we've had to get permission. Yeah, we've had to get permission from property owners to tear down a cabin. And you go in there and, you know, to get rid of them. But, you know, they're living all over Joshua Street.
Larry, are you talking about people squatting in abandoned cabins?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Abandoned cabins, abandoned houses. Or vacant houses.
Okay.
Down campers.
Fully livable houses that are vacant, that are broken into.
Holes in the ground.
I understand the concern. I can certainly sympathize with the situation, but remember, we are law enforcement. We have to work within the parameters of the law. In other words, if they're squatting on a property, we need to work with the property owner, whether that property owner is the houses in back taxes and it's the county of San Bernardino, or it's a real person. And that somehow, I understand the frustration, it takes time to work with it, but it has to be somebody who is an actual victim of that crime.
So essentially nothing.
Well, that's not what I said at all.
That's kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Okay.
I mean, do we find the property owner from, you know, public records, and I call and say, hey, there's somebody cooking up meth on your property, you know?
Well,
we're also terrorizing the neighborhood by, you know, stealing stuff. can you call the police? Is that what it comes,
You can certainly call us and we will come out and do an investigation. But remember, sir, when you talk about law enforcement, whether it's here or in another part of California, the laws we're enforcing are based upon the penal code, the vehicle code, the civil code or government code at times. Just because it's frustrating, and I understand a lot of this is, okay, I get that, it's very frustrating. We can't make up our own version of enforcement because it's convenient or it might make a better fix at that moment. So we'll do what we can, but sometimes it's not, maybe not what you want.
The cabin, and you can find the hypodermic needles, you can find the drugs. We had one guy shoot at his girlfriend.
Okay, now we're getting individual cases. I think he understands what you're saying. One suggestion I would have is call code enforcement. If there is a problem with the actual property itself and it's out of code, there is a process to go through. Eventually, if there's not a property owner, the back taxes, they will bulldoze the structure and that'll solve your problem.
There's so many vacant homes out here.
Okay, but
People can just pull up in their car, get out, and set up residence.
I understand. Captain Joling, he will make a report. I'm not sure there's an answer tonight, but that's something we can work on.
Call code enforcement is called the sheriff's. Call the sheriff, says you have to call code enforcement.
Okay, go ahead. Next question, Mary Helen.
Is being in possession of stolen goods not considered evidence?
How to change the subject?
The question's in negative form? Is it straight argumentative? Or
No, I don't know that.
Can I pass the mic to somebody else, Mary Helen?
No, I don't mean to. I'm not arguing with you, Captain. No, I'm really not. Okay, let me rephrase the question. Captain Joling.
Yes, ma'am.
Is being in possession of stolen goods considered evidence? Are these stolen goods considered evidence, no matter whose possession they're in?
Well, don't make faces at me because it makes it, but so, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, there are several questions all about the same thing, and I mean this all in seriousness.
Okay, let's do it.
And it's got to do with the thefts and burglaries in Joshua Tree, in Friendly Hills, throughout our area, and per your graph, there's quite a lot. What is being done about them to prevent them? Are you doubling efforts?
Let me take that one step at a time. We've arrested, I don't know, we do a press release on them, but we have arrested many different groups. Most of the crime when it comes to property crime, such as residential burglary, whether it's commercial burglary, residential burglary, is cyclic in nature. And what I mean by cyclic in nature is it typically involves a group of people who have decided to become joined in the enterprise of local crime, and they're going to break into places. When they get rounded up, those statistics drop off. Some property, whatever is left can be rounded up, gets returned to the victim. Okay, until another group starts up again. So that's why some months are heavier than others. Doubling efforts, what staff we have work constantly to prevent burglary is truly a neighborhood watch thing, and it involves a partnership with the community because there is not enough law enforcement sworn staff between all of our agencies to go out and enforce and try and prevent people, or even be psychic enough to know who wants to go commit a crime to then talk them out of it. So it's more of a reactive when we talk property crimes of stealing cars, committing robberies, doing residential burglaries. It's more responsive, investigative. God willing, part of that investigation results in an arrest and the recovery of the victim's property. But burglary deterrence is really all of our jobs. I live in this community. I've lived in this community for 26 years. It's more of paying attention and you see something, report it, take pictures. We like pictures and video, and get involved alongside of us.
Several of us have found our own stolen
stolen, and we couldn't get any follow-up support on that. So apparently, the investigation followed through this frustration for a while.
Okay, I understand.
If you have a camera or computer that notifies you that there's a break-in and you're out of town, but your phone says, hey, there's something going on, what's the number you can call to say what has just happened and to report it?
You can either call, you can call dispatch, but if you call the local sheriff's station at 366-4175, it also has, I think if you push 1 or 2, it sends you straight over to dispatch. We just started that last week to give people an option to get them right to the people they needed to talk to.
This is a two-part question for you as well. On your graph, you said there was 23,310. Where is that number? What does that number encompass? Not Yucca Valley, not 29 Palms?
That does not, it is the population number off of, that minus the incorporated cities of 29 Palms and Yucca Valley.
In the Morongo Basin, so that would include
Yes.
Wonder Valley. Does that include
All the
Morongo
communi-
Valley as well?
Yes, includes all the communities we talked about.
How many sheriff officers are on duty at any one time in the entire basin? And if I'm not mistaken, don't you go from Needles to Morongo Valley?
Yes, for all the way from Riverside County here off to the west, all the way to the east to the Kelbaker Road, Cadiz area, all the way north to Lucerne Valley. It's just north of 2,700 square miles. On any given shift, it does vary depending on what staffing we have available. Anywhere from between 2 and 4 deputy sheriffs on duty at a time.
The question also had to do with, I think Apple Valley, Victorville area has about 150,000. How many sheriffs do they have compared to what you have in the Morongo Basin?
I'm not sure what Apple Valley Station, the Apple Valley Sheriff Station is a contract sheriff station that just handles the incorporated town of Apple Valley. Does not handle any county area whatsoever. It's just the town borders. And I'm not exactly sure what their staffing is, and that's by contract of what that city of the police services that they're paying the sheriff's department to provide for them.
Okay. The next question has to do with, no. For the district attorney office. I'll give you a break. District Attorney Office Integrity Unit. What is the procedure if a public official violates their constitutional duties?
Yeah, I know. The district attorney's office does have a unit of attorneys and investigators solely dedicated to public integrity cases, which typically involves public officials. It's a unit made up of 4 attorneys, so, yeah, and it's based in San Bernardino. They do have their own investigators. The district attorney's office has a website, and you can report things through there. Those do get directed to the appropriate unit to handle those reports. Or if it's something more serious, sometimes those calls go directly into the sheriff, and then we'll direct them to the public integrity unit. Through email or through phone calls? I see a hand. I don't know if we want to do that now or...
No, not now.
Okay.
Some cities have nuisance laws. If a property has several complaints over a period of time by neighbors for criminal activity, then the DA can sue for city confiscation of the property. Does San Bernardino County have such a law?
In my near 19 years, we've never confiscated a property under those types of circumstances. There are plenty of times where the occupants are incarcerated and prosecuted, but there's no basis to do what to the house? To confiscate it?
Yes.
No. If it was involved in narcotics activity, sometimes there will be a seizure of property associated with that. I don't know if that will include the house as well. We don't see that happening here in the Morongo Basin.
Okay, this goes back to Captain Joling. On the slide, you said 0 reported murders for 2015. In the question session, you said 1 murder in 29 Palms resulting in arrest.
That was because that was for the incorporated city of 29 Palms. And tonight, we're just talking about the unincorporated areas.
Good answer. Okay. Good. So, that's not a question. How have each of you adjusted your strategies to deal with the changes in the law? She meant AB 109 and who? And Prop 47.
As far as the sheriff's department goes, we are learning how to do business a very different way and be very flexible. And that goes all the way from how we run the jails throughout the county, as well as a lot of education to all of our deputies who serve all the citizens in the community on keeping them updated in this never-ending change, because it wasn't just one change. It seems to be there's a series of changes. And because if you make a big change like what occurred, it affects life for all the citizens in a number of ways. So that's how we are.
The changes in the legislation affected crime in this state has been very difficult to hold accountable individuals who are committing crimes in the community. AB 109 involved sending state prisoners to the county, which took away space for people that we might otherwise be able to keep in jail who are trespassing and petty thieves and crimes of that nature. Prop 47 reduced a large body of felonies to misdemeanors. And I just want to mention one other thing while I'm on this point. Prop 47 was something I believe the governor put on the ballot back in 2014, 2015, that the voters voted on to reduce felonies to misdemeanors. The voters voted to change the 3 strikes laws so that we let out a large number of felons who'd previously been put in prison for life based on a history of victimizing people. Those people were released. Now the governor has another initiative on the upcoming election to decrease sentences even further for a more serious class of criminals. And I mention these things because people are presented these options as this is a drug treatment program. All these thefts and trespassings are drug related. Drugs are not a victim of crime, and we have many fewer resources to deal with them. What we do look at on drugs, we're looking at the quantity someone possesses. Do they possess it for their own use, or do they possess it for sales? In that situation, we'll charge the more serious offense. Similarly, theft. One of the things that annoys me, I'm surprised no one has mentioned, is mail thefts. See far too many people in possession of other people's mail. It's very difficult to prove those cases. They always say, we found it in the trash, someone gave it to me. It may seem silly, but ultimately we have to convince a jury, 12 people, that they stole it and they intended to steal it. And sometimes that's not as easy as it sounds, even in a small community. But when we can, if we have 2 people working together to steal mail or to steal from Walmart that we see too often, we'll charge them as a felony, because then we can charge conspiracy to commit theft. So we're trying to work with what we have to get the people that we feel are victimizing the community off the streets for as long as we can.
Just one quick follow-up. Didn't the Supreme Court tell California that it had to reduce the number of people in prison? So, I mean, you're saying that it was the voters, but those rates have to be reduced, right? We were ordered to have those rates reduced?
Absolutely, that's true. We believe there's just other options. I mean, it may be building prisons. It's really an assessment of priorities, and there's other housing options. But some of the people that are getting let out are much more violent than is being represented, in my opinion.
On that note, I knew this would come up. We pulled the register of voters voting for Prop 47, and 49% of the local Morongo Basin voted no, and the rest of California voted 51% yes. So you were outvoted by the rest of California.
Okay, I have just two more questions. A neighbor says that a resident, one of her neighbors, has called the sheriffs approximately 52 times in the last year, and the sheriffs respond every time. Apparently, she thinks that's a waste of time. Does it come to a point where you guys don't respond?
It is very rarely that we will actually stop responding. We will keep coming. If people call for service, it is our policy by Sheriff McMahon, as well as me as here as the local station commander. If you call for service from us, we will go. It may take us a while. We may have to drive a long ways. We may not be there in 5 minutes, but we will come and we will see and we will try and help.
Last question. At neighborhood watch meetings, sheriff's reps gets asked, how can residents protect themselves? Can they beat or shoot intruders?
Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, invariably this comes up. Here's the bottom line, and here's the DA who's going to prosecute you if I get this wrong. People have a right to defend themselves in what is reasonable based on the circumstances before them. If they need to protect themselves, their loved ones, there's a life in danger. Remember, as far as public safety goes, that's really why you have all of us up here, is to try and keep you safe. However, if you did the math, there's only so many of us on duty, and we're so big and we're so spread apart. It's really you and your neighbors that sometimes have to step up, and if your life's in danger or you got to do, as long as it's reasonable and you can explain it. I can't tell you whether you can hit them with a crowbar or kick them in the shin, because I'm not psychic. So it's what's reasonable and appropriate at that time. And sometimes it's appropriate just to be a good witness. Okay, he's stealing a garden gnome. Okay. Do you want to hit him in the crowbar for stealing a garden gnome, or you want to take a picture of him with your cell phone, which we'll use to prosecute him? So that's my answer, Mary Helen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mark, it's you.
Okay, come to the point now, we're doing pretty good on time, so let's go ahead and open it up for questions. Tom will be going around, and we've got a few hands up now. He'll get to you sooner or later. And please keep it to a couple of minutes.
I was wondering, do you think you're adequately staffed for the geographic area that you cover?
Between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. I am.
Well, what needs to be done to increase the staff size of the law enforcement resources?
The staffing of the availability of how much deputy sheriff staffing I get is really decided between the board of supervisors and the sheriff of what available staff he has to provide us and what the needs that we have.
So we need to appeal to our supervisor then, our county supervisor.
You certainly may. I always encourage more support and additional staff as we go.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment on that? Probably the quickest way to get a audience with a supervisor is a video conferencing center in Joshua Tree at the county building. It's way underused. It's set up every supervisor's meeting. You can have a two-way conversation, not a conversation, but comments to the supervisor. And nothing gets your attention more than actually showing up and commenting before the board of supervisors. So the video conferencing center usually starts at about 10 a.m. Every supervisor's meeting, twice a month. You can go online and get a schedule. Come on down and tell your comments and relay your frustrations to the supervisors, and they eventually will listen. So please use that. And you have one tomorrow at 9 a.m. or starting at 10 a.m. in the county building in Joshua Tree, right next to the courthouse. All you have to do is fill out a request form, and you'll be put on the docket. The comment period has actually been moved up on their agenda over the past 6 months, so it's a little you get to the supervisors a little quicker than you used to a year ago. So please take advantage of that process. Go ahead.
This is for Captain Joling, I believe, but for everybody, really. My wife and I are relatively new to the area, moving from LA County. And for the last 15 years, we've been volunteers on the crime scene search unit there. And we've been asked by the FBI, DEA, all the law enforcement agencies, especially the Highway Patrol, to help them find lost, tossed guns, bullets, shell casings, because we have expertise in the use of metal detectors. And I suspect in this community, with all the small-scale miners here, there's quite a few other citizens who have these skills. And so I think the earlier question about what can we do to help, is there some way that people with skills such as ours can volunteer to help you guys out when you need to find a gun or a bullet?
That is a great question, sir, and the answer is absolutely yes, just maybe not in the manner it was within the Los Angeles Basin. We have search and rescue, which we rely upon our volunteers within the search and rescue unit. They are department members, but they are volunteers who assist us with evidence searches, finding guns, ammunition, bullet casings, and such. And within that, there are specialized categories within search and rescue as well. So the answer is yes. I think it's the second Thursday of every month here at the local sheriff station at 7 p.m. We welcome the public, fill out an application, and come on down and you can volunteer. You can also be citizens on patrol and patrol the local communities.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've recently heard that backlog for CCW warrants was like 1,500. Is that still the case? Are they being issued?
Sheriff McMahon is absolutely committed that every law-abiding citizen who can qualify for a concealed weapons permit will get one. We had the process down prior to December 2nd, down to within 90 days. After the terrorist attack in San Bernardino on December 2nd, the process is now about 8 months just to even get to the interview. 8 months. Riverside County is, you're into, if you call tomorrow morning, they're into, depending on which county you live in, they're into at least 2017. So, but yeah, so it's fairly lengthy. We'll get to it. There's just a lot of people. We've had a very critical incident that happened in our county, so it's pushed that process back. However, if you meet all of the criteria for concealed weapons permit and you live in San Bernardino County, we're committed that if you're qualified to have one, and there'll be that we do an investigation for each person we issue to. If you're qualified, you're going to get one. Yeah, Sheriff McMahon's a great guy, and he loves guns.
My earlier question was regarding numbers because I think that we're underrepresented. And I'm highly suspect of the figure 23,500, is it? Okay, my problem with that is I don't question your internal data at all because you guys know what crimes happen and what reports you get. But the Morongo Basin, not counting the Marine base, because the Marine base is 12,000 plus whatever comes in and out Marine-wise. But the Morongo Basin Incorporated area has Twin Palms is 15,000, Yucca Valley is 21,000, that's 36,000 in total. The Morongo Basin, not counting the Marine base, is close to 75 to 80,000 people. And such as Joshua Tree is just under 9,000. And my suspicion is somebody's doing some numbers from the internet or something because that's off by at least 10,000 people. So my question is, where is that 23,000 derived from?
Well, I certainly don't work for the Census Bureau. And actually, I got that from the analyst who worked for the department, and I couldn't honestly tell you exactly how they came to that number. It was more recent than the census in 2010. They said it was in 2015. But I can't tell you exactly how they come. I'm working with the information that the analysts can pull for me. So if it's off 10,000, I believe you, but I just don't know.
Well, I don't know, like Yucca Valley is probably, Wonder Valley is probably, 1,500 to 2,000 people, maybe? You know, there's sort of questions all around on this kind of stuff, but I do know Joshua Tree is just under 9,000. So you can ask them, what's the population of Joshua Tree, and they'll tell you, oh, it's 5,000. So who knows?
David, if the population was a lot higher than you thought, that means the crime per capita would be a lot lower, right? Okay.
Yeah, I'm Mike Casey. This is more for the DAs than anybody else. Used to live in Arizona, had a carry permit, and in Arizona, you can go off your property to save somebody's life. Is that allowed here or not? I.e., I'm seeing somebody beat you with a baseball bat, and the only way I can stop them is with deadly force.
I probably would direct that to the sheriff. I can tell you, I have never prosecuted someone for defending themselves or someone else, even if it was off their property. Now, just so you know, everyone who kills somebody, not everyone, many people say they were defending themselves, but never in the situation you've described. Sheriff Jolie may have some other thoughts.
Okay, like I said before, it really doesn't matter where on the planet that this goes down. You know, when I grew up, it was always, hey, you better drag and make sure they're over the doorstep, right? Not quite so, because it really doesn't matter where it happens. Does it happen in your living room, or does it happen at in the middle of Walmart, or does it happen? Does it matter if it happens down here alongside the highway, or you went out to eat? Does it matter where it happens? I mean, if it happens in San Bernardino County, my agency is going to be involved, and eventually district attorney is going to look at it. We're going to look at kind of the same things. We're going to look at physical evidence. We're going to talk to some witnesses. We're going to talk to you. We're going to find out, hey, look, one, are you lying to us? But if you're telling the truth, okay, was it reasonable? Okay, was it the appropriate, lawful thing for you to do at the time? Doesn't matter where it happened. Circumstances are going to be a little bit different each time, okay? But did it make sense to you? And make sure, does this make sense to other people? Because some folks, they go, yeah, I had to shoot him 16 times. And maybe that just what isn't going to float by the time it gets to his desk. Okay, but that's going to be the gauge. Is was your action lawful and was it appropriate? Fair enough.
Okay, looks, anybody else? We got one more chance? Going, gone? Okay, one more.
By your own ground, burglaries have just exploded in the Joshua Tree area. No question about that, but.
Yes, sir.
Can something be done? Where I live on a dirt road off of Aberdeen, and I can't even count how many places have been broken into multiple times out there. I ran across a guy trying to kick the back door in of a place and chased him off. But we don't get regular patrols out there. The only time we see officers are when they're called. And, that's just going to continue on if there's, no police presence.
Okay, well. No. I'm not trying to dispute with you what the statistics show and how much crime has actually occurred. But let's rationalize this for a second, okay?
And we have formed a neighborhood watch. We've had over 40 people at a neighborhood watch meeting 4 or 5 months ago. But it still goes on.
Sir, if I had double the staff, I still would not have a deputy on every corner. If when you talk about police presence, that's kind of subjective, because it is not the model, nor are we ever going to be at the staffing where you're going to have somebody. We'll have the people who live there, which is why we support Neighborhood Watch, to say, look, if you're reporting it and somebody's committing a crime, call us and we'll come. But sir, I tried to explain to everybody really kind of where the staff are at. We provide service to the communities. try to explain, hey, look, this is where we're at and what we're doing. And when you say, hey, it takes you a long time, they're either busy on one thing and it's a long ways to drive to the next one.
The thieves know you don't control the dirt roads and stuff. So that's where they're gonna concentrate their efforts and stuff. If they can break into a house on a dirt road, that's easy pickings. You know, if they know there's never gonna be a cop come by. You know, you guys spend all your time driving paved roads and stuff. You know, when you come on the dirt road, only the call.
See,
At least that's what I say.
I understand that's your perception, but let me just put this. When you see the deputies on a paved road, it's because you can blame me, because if they're headed to 29 Palms to Wonder Valley for a call, I don't want them driving the dirt roads. I want them getting there because there's somebody there waiting for service. They have to use the paved roads as major thoroughfares to get from one call to the other.
But I'm just saying,
Okay,
some sort of presence.
can we have the next question, please? Okay. I think he understands. Can we have the next question, please? This gentleman was standing up first.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I saw the statistics, I'm not going to dispute it, but, half the people I know in this community personally have had their house broken into in the last 6 months. I don't know if that was the case a few years ago, but I think most people care quite a bit about that. And it seems like, and again, I don't know this in terms of statistics, but I have heard anecdotally that the people that have been caught for this, what few of them have spent 2 days in jail and been let out. To me, this kind of a crime is a very serious crime. I mean, when this country was built, the idea of government was to protect your life and your property. If you're not doing that, you're failing flat out. Why are we paying property taxes? Why are we paying, 40% of our taxes for this? If this is a question of priorities, I want to know who's in jail in this town. There were no murders last year. I see a division for human trafficking. I mean, this isn't Little Saigon.
Why don't we let the district attorney answer that question? Can we do that, please?
There's a couple parts to that. One, we do have a surprising number of human trafficking cases in this area, largely surrounding the base. And
Okay, I don't want to pick on human trafficking.
Sure.
But if I'm in Crossroads and somebody asks me, do I know anybody who's been trafficked here?
Sir, I think,
I used to be from Mars.
sir, I'm not being argumentative, but
I know a lot of people have had their house broken.
sir, when that slide was up, that slide dealt with what specialized support divisions are on this agency. This is the largest by mass county in the United States. Those are specialized support divisions that are out of San Bernardino. That is not local personnel that are working on human trafficking, unless there's a specialized case for it. When we talk about a homicide division,
Morongo Basin, right?
the Morongo Basin Sheriff's Station is a patrol division. We have a jail. We have a staff to provide patrol for the unincorporated areas as well as 2 incorporated cities. Our focus is providing service to the citizens. I understand your frustration, but let's not mix our metaphors here. I understand your frustration, but it is not the sheriff's deputies that are the driving force behind people committing crime. In 2014, we had the entire year's burglaries were down 91. Was your residential burglary rate. It jumped to 212 residential burglaries in a year. The district attorney's right when he says, hey, look, what happened in between those 2 bars is Prop 47.
if I could just continue. One, anyone we're seeing for residential burglary is not going to be through the system in 2 days. It's possible a judge would OR them, it's possible they bailed out, but we're not going to be releasing them within typically anything less than 6 months. Amongst the many changes to clear the jails was 50% credit for most crimes. That's the other thing. We sentence someone to a year, and if that's the maximum they can get on most misdemeanors, it's either 6 months or a year. At most, they're going to serve half that time, and that's assuming they stay in that long. But if it's residential burglary, we're typically looking at prison. If there's problems of proof, which a lot of times there are, because, we can't even being in possession of property, we can't always prove they stole it. So we'll charge them with what we can, possession of the stolen property when we can, but you should see them in jail for longer than that. You're always welcome to call us, especially if you know someone's victimized. I'd prefer to talk to you. It's good to know we have an interested victim in a case. As you've heard with the trespassing cases, we sometimes can't find the victims. People don't always transfer property in this area like through the county. They sign things over to somebody and they quit claim it, and they gave it to a brother or a cousin, and we can't find out whose property it is sometimes from our standpoint to get the person in to say they didn't have permission to come in their house to take the stuff. And without that one critical element, there's no crime. We have to prove they didn't have permission. So we're always interested in people who are willing to go forward so that we can get these people off the street. And one thing that's nice about a small community like this is sometimes just getting a half dozen people off the street will make a big difference in the crime in an area. So we're eager to get those people off the street. And Ms. Berge would like to add to that.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions and move on to the comments.
Can I add something to that real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, thanks. All right, so here's my own personal little story. While I was volunteering for the district attorney's office and I was still in law school and tired, at 2 o'clock in the morning I woke up and there were 2 guys right there in my house. And I chased them, which surprised, I think I was in my robe, and I think there was some foul language in there, but I chased them out. But I blew it, and I didn't call the deputy sheriffs. I was tired. It was 2 in the morning. I didn't want them to come to my house. I didn't want to have to make a report. I figured nothing would happen, and I didn't see them enough to describe them in my mind. You would not believe how much I caught for that, because they said, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you call us? Why didn't you tell us? If you could have told us there were 2 guys wearing hoodies, it's 2 in the morning near your house, we could have had patrol deputies looking around for him, and we could have maybe kept them from going into the next person's house. And the next person's house they were in, Michelle, they said to me, how are you going to feel when the next person, they bring a gun? Because they're like, that old lady was chasing me around the house. I'm not going to have that happen again. And I was sitting there and I felt terrible. But I didn't do the right thing. I got an alarm system at my house now. But I should have reported it. I should have reported what I saw. And I should have let them do their jobs. And if they didn't catch them, that happens. But if they did, then maybe somebody else's house wouldn't have been burglarized. And a lot of times these deputies, they do live in the area, they patrol in the same areas, and they know who does the certain types of crimes. So they know how to follow up with those things. They say, you know who that sounds like? You know who lives right behind you, Ms. Berge? And I blew it. So one of the things that we really count on, law enforcement counts on, is a report from a neighbor, a report from you, a report from a witness. And we're not always going to catch everybody, but that's where it starts. And then one of the things that we need as DAs is exactly what a lot of you have been talking about is being a supportive witness. When you get that notice, that says that we need you to come and testify in court, or we need you to be a witness, those are the things we need, because my job, I have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. Everybody is entitled to a fair trial. And so if I don't have witnesses, if I don't have someone to say, yeah, 2 guys, hooded sweatshirts, they were about this tall, whatever it is that you've seen, we need those things. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that don't lose heart, keep reporting, keep calling, be vigilant, make those reports. If people are breaking into houses, trust me, we want to hold those people accountable. We want those people to not be doing that in our community. We want our communities to be safe. So make those reports.
We do make reports.
And just and keep, and if there, and believe me, if there are things that we can do to fix that, I know we will. I know the sheriffs will. And so after this, we'll sit and we'll talk. But we will do everything we can to improve what we're doing, because that's what we're here for. That's all we do, is we're here to fight for victims. And so if there's something that we can do in law enforcement to do a better job, that's what we're going to try to do.
Thank you. All right, we'll take two more questions and move on to our comment portion of the program.
My name is Judy, and this is for Captain Joling. Obviously, the community is concerned about the show of law enforcement as a deterrent. How many citizen on patrol vehicles are available at any one time to be staffed? Because we have a lot of people that care. If we can get the citizen on patrol vehicles out there driving on the dirt roads in our rural areas, because they can call in, they can't make contact. Is that going to help? And do we need, how many people do we need to have those citizen on patrol vehicles out there?
We have no shortage of citizens on patrol vehicles. We have room in our Joshua Tree Citizens on Patrol, as well as our Landers, Flamingo Heights. We've got plenty of vehicles. People want to come and join and get involved, more than welcome, everybody.
Okay, first I want to thank you guys, because I actually live out near Bob, and I've had to call the police multiple times. The one time that it was urgent, you were there within 5 or 6 minutes. Other times, it took an hour, because it wasn't so urgent. The crimes had already been committed. I personally witnessed 2 people engaging in robberies. I know that the police were contacted. I know that reports were made. I was also the first person to notice 2 robberies, both of which, or not robberies, where you go into a home and steal items from a home that's lived in. And I know that those were reported. I have a very, very hard time believing that I personally had the pleasure of witnessing 4% of the robberies in Joshua Tree. And I saw on your slide, and maybe I've misinterpreted it, that there were supposedly only 100 robberies in Joshua Tree last year. Yet the gentleman who's now earned the name Human Traffic Gentleman, sorry about that, said that he has multiple friends whose homes were broken into as well. I don't know if those were reported or not, but I think there's a much bigger problem here than was shown on your slide. And several of those stemmed from people who had been in the neighborhood actually squatting, not really causing any trouble, doing their drugs, until they decided to break into a home. We have a neighborhood watch. I've taken pictures, and I was told it was optional whether I emailed them to the police of the vehicles that I took during the break-in in the daylight. Unfortunately, no plates. Okay, but it just seems like there's a bigger problem than is really being acknowledged by the bar chart. But we thank you for what you're doing anyway, but it seems a little off.
It's accurate.
Okay.
But you needed to pay attention to the bar chart, because statistics can be somewhat confusing. There were 212 total residential burglaries. That means somebody went in and committed a theft in a residence, okay? There were 36 non-residential burglaries. A lot of those fell underneath another chart, which fell underneath all other thefts. So if they went in and stole a garden gnome, and it was a $900 garden gnome out of somebody's yard, it's going to fall under an all other theft, and it's going to be a misdemeanor. It's going to be a lesser crime. And if they come back the next day and steal the $925 gnome next to it, it's still, because there's no petty theft with the prior, that went away, so that's no longer makes it a felony. A year ago, that would have been, in 2014, oh my gosh, that would have been, you're headed for state prison, potentially. Nowadays, it's another misdemeanor.
So for simple person who can't do all that perfect math,
Okay, I
the bar chart of how many people kicked in somebody's door and stole some shit, how tall you are,
well, I'm trying to provide, we're trying to do the best job we can. It's not going to be perfect, but we're trying to do the best job we can on how many are actually burglaries, because that's been a topic here we talk about as a community. I understand Joshua Tree took a brunt of that 212, so did Flamingo Heights and Landers.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and we're going to move on to our comment section of the meeting now, which is limited to 3 minutes. Alexis Sonfeld? Or is it, was it Alex? Yeah, this is a comment period, and it's, if there's, we can't comment on the comment period of the program.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No answers. This is a comment portion of it.
I mean, my
yes.
comment was regarding what we've been talking about all night, which is the burglaries.
We're through with that section now. We're on to the comment portion of the agenda, which.
Okay, but I didn't know that when I filled the comment out, so I guess I made a mistake, so. Can
Okay.
I not comment?
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
All right, well.
Go ahead. We'll take one if you take just a couple of minutes, okay?
This is my comment. I mean, I think the entire community is grateful for the fact that we have law enforcement. And what we keep hearing is Prop 47 and AB 109, and, you know, statistics aren't really that high. It's cyclical, but I've lived up here for 20 years, and I can tell you, I've never seen anything like this up here. I've had my next door neighbor's house broken into, which I interrupted a robbery in progress. Your response time was great. I'm not the owner of that house, but I called. I think 5 or 6 officers came out in 3 vehicles, which I thought was odd, seeing as you're so understaffed. And 4 of the people really didn't do anything, and one guy, they were kind of joking around, and one guy looked at tracks and looked at tire prints. And I pointed out to him an area in the house because these people come up for vacation, but they don't live here all the time, which is why the house got broken into. And the officer that was doing that stuff refused to take fingerprints, and he kept insisting that the people were probably from Landers, even though I knew they weren't. They were from down the street. And that's an example of one robbery. I think, handed you guys on a silver platter somebody that was probably responsible for dozens of the burglaries that you didn't solve. I had a vehicle license plate for 3 vehicles. I had ID and descriptions, photographs of the people, all the activity that they did. And I was referred to dispatch, and I requested to give the information because you had asked for information leading to arrests of all these robberies. So I was transferred to dispatch, and instead of the information going to whoever the detectives were that were working on all these burglaries, they sent an officer out to the house who then asked these people that were squatting at the house that have been doing all these robberies for probably the last 3 months, called me back 5 minutes later and said, hey, we went out to the house and talked to the owners, and everybody said everything's okay. So I was so baffled and pissed off that I called back, and then I had to deal with some flack from the lady that was answering the phone. I eventually went in and talked to a watch commander. I asked him to follow up. I never got a return phone call. I called several more times, played phone tag, and I gave up. But basically, nothing got done. The next 2 weekends later, there were some 16 robberies, 8 on the north side, 8 on the south side, within a block of the sheriff's station. And you know, it's been going on like that for basically 8 months. And I think, and I've offered to you guys, I think what you need to do instead is, we actually know what's going on in our neighborhoods better than you do because you don't patrol them. So if we call up and say, hey, you should check this house out, I volunteered my property and other properties in the neighborhood for you guys to just park your vehicle and watch what goes on all night, and you would probably be able to, within minutes, just run the plate and be able to arrest 3 or 4 felons that are responsible for a large part of the crime up here.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go on to the comment period. First, David Fick. Yeah, please take the podium so we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, and now, is this on? No.
Use this one.
This on? Okay. And now for something completely different. As some people know here, but I'll just say it, I was on the Joshua Tree Mac from 2006 to 2012, and my comments are towards my investigations on the NextEra RAM PPA through what I thought is SCE. But I want to give you a little background, and this is going to be a little different for people who thought that they understood what's going on with Cascade Solar. I took their word for it. Now, I dealt with Cascade Solar privately and in the public meetings. And in Cascade Solar, they told me and they told the public that it was a RAM, a 20 megawatt RAM. It was the south half, it was an SCE contract. And the SCE contract was supplying the lower half of the development, which was the bottom 75 acres. That's not what happened. That's what they approved, but that's not what happened. It is a 24 megawatt facility, which is 4 megawatts over what the maximum of a RAM can have. And it was to be supplying 4,400 houses or households in Joshua Tree. This is not SCE. Cascade Solar is San Diego Gas and Electric. So what was approved in December 2012 was much different than what they built. And of course, a lot of people here know that they illegally graded for 2 weeks, and they were red tagged, and they also stole water from the Joshua Basin Water District. And basically, Sun Edison, running Cascade Solar, lied to us, stole from us, and lied to us several times more. So my question is, I'm investigating the RAM on the NextEra project, and whatever investigations I have, now this is confidential information between NextEra and SCE. They do have a real SCE PPA, but it's from BP from 2011, which is 5 years old. And they were paying top money back then. Prices have come down almost half of that. So that's what we're investigating now. I would recommend people go to the supervisors meeting tomorrow at the video conference in Joshua Tree, and hopefully I'll have a bit more information up on the webpage that we supply. That's it.
Thank you, David. Al Marquez.
Al Marquez, Sunfair area.
Microphone to your left.
This left?
Yes.
Al Marquez, Sunfair area. The Sunfair community is having a community cleanup in March 5th, and that would include Panoramic Heights, Copper Mountain Mesa, if they wanted to bring some trash or whatever, tires, and also people that live in the LaFernie Rice Road area. They can also bring trash there. But of course, they probably will be asking for identification for everybody, just to make sure that they're within Joshua Tree area. And that'll be March 5th. We still haven't found the location of where we're going to have the dumpsters. Right now, code enforcement is talking about the High Desert Airport, Roy Williams Airport, or the county offices on the highway, but they haven't made a decision yet. So somehow we'll let the community know where it's going to be, but it's definitely for March 5th. Also, I don't want to reiterate what David said about the next solar project, but I brought some protest signature forms if you want to sign up to protest that solar energy project, which is approximately 115 acres that they're having there. And they're also on adjacent property. through the Planning Commission, they have a proposal for a temporary use permit to construct a temporary solar weather station. Whatever that is beyond me. I don't know what it is. But it's approximately 30 some odd acres that they're going to be using for that project. And I'd like to reiterate that if we can get as many signatures as possible for the protest, and it's on the table here. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Next comment, Ed Valorand.
Here, I live in Desert. Okay, my name's Ed Valleran. I live in Desert Heights. I'm a property owner out here, and I'm kind of disappointed. We were told on the fire department takeover of 29 Palms that meetings would be held local, and in the Desert Trail, it hasn't, in the City Hall in San Bernardino, so we won't even be able to telecon from the center up here. You know, that's very disappointing after we were told that these meetings would be local. For about 4 years, I've written a whole bunch of editorials trying to have a much cheaper local volunteers being used in 29 Palms and elsewhere from Copper Mountain College. We got a real good program, or they got a real good program out there. And all they do, you know, the only community that had the foresight to use them is Morongo Valley. You know, these are local people that know our dirt roads and stuff like that, and we're packed in 29 Palms. There's not a single fireman other than the chief that lives in the city. Most don't even, when we had 6, only 1 lived in Morongo Basin. You know, we got foreigners at an inflated price. We've had meetings in Wonder Valley. I own property out there. The first view graph shows what's happening in 29 Palms, what the cost is right now for our taxes, and what it's going to be. We're seeing these 3 200-house complexes that are leased to the base. Their taxes are going to go from $16,000 down to $148.24. And in the paper, it talks on the protest that the protest is a function of the assessed value. These are new constructions. My second view graph shows they talk about the rates only going up by 3%. I compared the last 2 county fire department contracts, a 1-year difference, and it shows that on the firefighters, they only got a 2 to 3, but the chiefs and the engineers saw double-digit pay raises. How can you pay a double-digit pay raise out of only 3%? The pages behind it are the actual copies from the contract, and the pages behind that is part of Chief Chamberlain's presentation showing what I consider to be very, very bloated rates. We got a lot of people that this is their means of eating. This is a meal. And we're talking 2,700 meals for the people in Wonder Valley to give up so that we can have a fire department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. Okay, it looks like CHP got away free on this, and the park got away with no problem at all, but we appreciate you coming. You're part of law enforcement also, so I appreciate it. We had no idea how this was going to go tonight. We just kind of winged it. We've learned a lot tonight, and next one, we plan on doing this probably next year sometime, towards the end of the year, and we can tailor it a little better to what we saw tonight. I think it went pretty well, and I appreciate everybody's patience and consideration and waiting for the other person to comment. And I'd like to give a big hand to our panel of professionals. Thank you all for coming. Good night.